Hello and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where we dive deep into regional headlines and speak with leading policymakers and business leaders. I am Katie Jensen. With environmentalists warning that the world is on the brink of crisis unless drastic action is taken to address climate change, we speak to Francesco La Camera, the Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency. We ask him whether Europe and the UK's recent move to reopen coal mines at a time when most countries are phasing out fossil fuels is a sign of environmental hypocrisy. Plus, which countries will fill the funding gap needed to achieve net zero by 2050, and what steps need to be taken at COP28 to hold governments accountable for their actions. Mr. La Camera, thank you for joining us today on Frankly Speaking. Now, IRENA has warned that the world is on the brink of crisis if urgent action is not taken to reduce global greenhouse emissions. Now, your research shows that we can expect frequent and severe environmental consequences affecting millions of people around the world. Now, at the same time, we are seeing countries from Europe and the UK reopening coal mines. So, frankly speaking, is it surreal that the very same countries that have for long warned against climate change are now turning into highly polluting alternatives?
So naturally, we have to understand that we are living the time of the Ukrainian crisis, and the countries has to respond to the lack of the gas coming from Russia. So naturally, in looking what's happening, we have always to distinguish between the very short term and the medium long term. So naturally, in the short term, countries are trying what they can for not depriving their own public with the heating and cooling that is needed. But we have also assisted that they are taking measures like the Inflation Act in the United States, the New Power in the EU, and other piece of legislation around the world, in India, in Japan, South Korea, and others, in China, that make clear that this crisis is pushing the run to the energy transition. So in the medium long term, we expect to have an acceleration of the transition itself. And we have to understand that in short term, we may have some shortcoming. But what we are also assisting that we don't see heavy investment returning fossil fuel. We are just looking at to initiatives that exploit the best of what is already there. So I don't see danger in the medium long term for the energy transition.
Well, you've spoken there about the need for an acceleration for this energy transition, but frankly, it feels like we are doing the opposite. Isn't it these very same European and North American countries who have led us through the Industrial Revolution, but are responsible for the very pollution levels we see today? Doesn't it seem ridiculous that these countries who are pointing fingers at other nations are responsible for the pollution we see today, and the fact that many of them are now looking at alternatives like coal?
No, I don't think that we cannot say that, honestly. We think that, again, that they are trying to find remedies to the shortage of Russian gas, but their policies in the medium long term are very clear. So we are not going backward. Also, the last year has been a record year for investment in renewables. We have broke new records of new installing capacity of renewables. Now, we have 81% of the new installing capacity be renewables. So the energy transition is in place and nothing can stop it. This process is unstoppable. The only question that we have now is not the direction travel that is clear and nothing can change it. The question is the speed and the scale of this transformation, because it is not at a pace that may to the achievement of the Paris Agreement goal and the Sustainable Development Goals.
So you say that things like coal mines are not going to change this energy transition, but there's certainly no doubt that achieving net zero is going to take considerable considerable investment into the renewable energy sector. I think the current gap each year is estimated at more than $1.35 trillion each year. So where is this money going to come from, and what kind of future are we looking at if we can't access these funds in time?
So, and naturally, again, to be clear, so we have no doubts on where we are going. And also in an acceleration of this path, we are not in line with the Paris Agreement goals. So we say very clearly that we needed in this decade 57 trillion of investment in the energy transition. We are not there at all. We say that we needed up to 2030 to triple our installed capacity in renewables, and this is not happening. So all these breaking records and more renewables are not yet at a pace that is consistent with the achievement of the Paris Agreement goal. Where this money came from? We have a clear idea on that. There is a lot of liquidity in the market. The question is our point of view that today there are not the right policies in place to activate the demand, for example, for the green hydrogen, for hydrogen, and there is not yet enough focusing on the infrastructure needed for sustain the building of the new energy system. And when we talk about the infrastructure, we talk about the physical, the legal, and the institutional capacity and professional skill careers.
So you say there's still a gap when it comes to public and private sector at the moment. I was interested to read a report from IRENA earlier this month that you have warned that the recent decline in capital investment in fossil fuel production that began to drop off during the pandemic, you say that has now bounced back. Would you agree that it's bounced back because of wildly popular but highly unattainable campaigns by the likes of Joe Biden? He had promised no more drilling on federal lands, but we've certainly seen quite a U-turn on that recently.
So we don't think that we are bouncing back, honestly. What I'm saying, say that in the very short term, for avoiding collapses and disruption in the energy supply, countries are trying to do what is possible to do. In some cases, this has been also reactivated coal mine. But there are not investment in new coal mine. At least we are not aware about that. So we know that there are investment that may become stranded assets in the next years. But generally thinking, I don't think that we are bouncing back. As I told you last year, we had 1.3 trillion investment in renewables, already increasing installed capacity, etc. But there are some barriers that we have identified in this lack of the demand and in the lack of the infrastructure in all its component that is needed to sustain an acceleration of the system. But there is no doubt, again, Katie, that we are going to a new energy system. The question is the speed and the scale, not the energy system as such.
Forgive me, what I mean is in terms of fossil fuel investment, that has bounced back, because I believe it had dropped by around 20% since the pandemic. But then last year, your report said it had now increased or bounced back by around 15%.
No, I don't. I don't read this argument. Naturally, we have to understand that the old system, the one centralized based on fossil fuel, cannot be shut in a day. So naturally, there will be a slowly decline of oil and gas. And to maintain a smooth decline of oil and gas, we need some investment again in oil and gas. If not, there will be a disruption. So we have to understand that there is a demand that is satisfied by renewables and fossil fuel today. Today, 75% for fossil fuels, 25% for renewables, more or less. And we have to understand this will change in the years to come. But to ensure that this will happen without disruption, I think that investment to maintain a soft decrease of oil and gas would be still needed.
Okay, so what would be a more balanced approach to ensure we can reach net zero and turn to more environmentally friendly alternatives without destabilizing current energy markets or causing rising prices to destroy lives and livelihoods?
Everything should be balanced. We have to understand that we have a demand of energy that is needed for development, and this demand will be increasing, especially in Africa and Southeast Asia. So if we want to have less oil and gas, we have to put more renewables into the grid. This is the main question. And we have to understand if we have barriers to have more renewables into the grid. The financial one that you mentioned is surely present, but in our point of view, what is lacking today is having the system that sustain the building of the new energy system. And talking about infrastructure, you cannot have more renewables into the grid if you don't have the grid, or if you don't have the chance to plug your plant into the grid. And the grid should be interconnected. And to make more renewables be ready in the energy system, we need grids that are interconnected and flexible, so smart grid. And we need also the way to balance the system for making it work. So we need to change the infrastructure that sustain the energy system.
So who is responsible for doing that? Is it governments? Is it the private sector? Where do we see that collaboration, particularly for developing nations who don't have access to the same kind of funds that emerging or developed nations do? Where does the onus lie?
Thanks for this question, because we are really working and focusing on trying to offer a response to this. We, in simple words, we say that we have to rewrite the way international cooperation works. So when we talk about physical infrastructure, we think that this should be the focus of the multilateral financial systems. And when we talk about the other two pillars of the infrastructure, so talking about legal and institutional capacity and professional career, is there where regional entities, bilateral cooperation may apply. So I hope that a reflection on how to have more renewables into the grid will also enhance a conversation, a discussion that will bring to a reform of the focus of the multilateral financial institutions.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of these opportunities. What are the most promising new clean technologies that you think will have a big impact in renewables in the coming years? Things like geothermal, hydrogen fuel cells, ocean energy. Where do you think the greatest potential lies?
You know, Katie, I'm a mother with no favorite children. We think that when we look at renewables, so we have to look at renewables in a holistic way. So think, for example, about hydropower. That is in some way a mature technologies. How relevant could be hydropower, balancing the system to ensure having more renewables into the grid, so in some way balancing the intermittency of renewables itself, so they can work all together. For green hydrogen, we need to produce electricity, so important solar, wind, but also geothermal could be important. So we have to think about renewables as a complex of solutions. Naturally, we can say that in the last year, solar has been the most important technologies where people has been invested more, but also onshore winds, and now offshore wind is coming strongly. But there is still attention of geothermal. There is a lot of attention of renewing the hydropower that is already in place. So I think that we have to look at renewables as a unique and holistic way.
All right, well, I wanted to get your thoughts on COP28. Of course, it will be taking place in the UAE in November this year. It's the second time the prestigious event has taken place in the Arab world. However, it has raised many questions, considering the UAE is also a major oil-producing country. So what role will IRENA play in the lead-up to COP28, and how will the organisation be involved in the conference?
So first of all, we need everyone in the energy transition. So oil and gas company, government and country where oil gases are relevant from an economic point of view, they must be part of the discussion. And also we want to say the UAE, Saudi Arabia has already shown a big ambition on going for renewables. Here is the place where you can produce electricity at lower cost in the world. And we have seen that countries in the Gulf are going for net zero, setting their own hydrogen strategy. So I think that this is not a danger for the COP. And we are working with the presidency as we have been done with the previous presidency. Naturally, this is also a special here for us. And we are concentrating especially on the stock-taking exercise. So for the first time, the COP in UAE will certify that we are not on track. And naturally, this cannot be the end of this COP. This COP has to come with a way to close the gap between where we are, where we should be. And IRENA is trying to work on building this narrative, so beyond the COP28, for offering the presidency something to be based their work in finding compromise among all the other countries. We are also engaged in a few initiatives that will be the one blue zone, if you may say, technical words. So not really the negotiation, but beside it, all the initiatives that the stakeholders will bring to the COP, like our Alliance for Industry Decarbonization, with the major companies with us in this effort. We are also working on the Alliance for offshore wind. We are working for providing adaptation measures and playing relevance for health, agri-foods, and the role of renewables and the women in the energy transition. So we have many initiatives that are accompanying our common efforts in supporting having this success. We are quite sure that this COP28 will be historical.
Now, UAE COP28 President-designate, His Excellency Sultan Al Jaber, he says capital is critical to make the Loss and Damage Fund, which was agreed upon at COP27, a reality. So has the fund materialised yet, or does it still remain empty?
So naturally, the loss damage is one of the critical points of that. I don't know what kind of solution could be found on it. So if it will be a special session of the Green Climate Fund, or whether they will create a new fund, this will be that will be discussed in the COP. And the presidency, I'm sure, will wisely lead this discussion on what should be done to close the gap. This is the major effort, and we have been discussing with you, Kate, some of these elements. In our point of view, are focusing not only on supply, as has been done in the previous COP, but also looking to the demand side of the equation, and understanding that there is a clear barrier in having more renewables into the grid if we don't intervene in building the infrastructure that's in all meaning of the infrastructure that may sustain the new system. Just to give you an example, if I can, in 1 minute, the old centralized energy system has been supported by an infrastructure that made possible for the gas extraction coming to our house, having our heating, our cooling. We have the harbor, we have the ship, we have the pipeline, we have the electroduct. This supporting system is not yet still to say sufficient for the coming of the new energy system. We need more for giving the infrastructure to be more flexible, having also the professional career, the institutional capacity. All this has to prepare for the new era.
I want to pick up on what you said there a couple of minutes ago. You said a new fund may be established at COP28. Is that because the Loss and Damage Fund is considered a failure? Does it remain empty? Is that why you're saying a new fund may be considered instead?
In this case, it's not me. It's what came from the discussion in Sharm el-Sheikh, where they agree on the principle to have a loss and damage attention. And that's been the first time that COP formally discussed this. And then we have the way to provide the funding for the loss damage, because the loss damage is the question for funding to repair the damage that's been done. So there will be, naturally, this will be a very difficult discussion on that. And the government, they have to make new promises and have to be credible, because the $100 billion per year is not yet there.
Okay, well, Sultan Al Jaber has said that COP28 must be a COP of action, one which moves the world from talking about goals to getting the job done. So what steps must be taken to ensure that countries are held accountable for their commitments? And what do you hope the legacy of COP28 will be?
And naturally, Dr. Sultan is absolutely right. And we have asked it now for a couple of years to have COP that may abandon the old negotiating style and be more close to the ground. The Egyptians, they have used the word implementing COP. Now we have a call for action. Concerning how to translate in reality, naturally, we expect that the final document of the COP will set some timeline with some ambition in this timeline. So it's what we call beyond the COP28. And this on what we are also concentrating our analysis for providing the presidency and the member states of IRENA with all the elements that may use in the negotiation to find for a final declaration that really may give hopes that finally something will move at the speed, the scale needed.
Well, I wanted to look a little bit more broadly throughout the region. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts of the Saudi Green Initiative. And again, what your response is to those who are cynical of them, considering Saudi is also a major oil producer in the world.
I really, naturally, if someone is asking you, you cannot have the supply without having the demand. So first of all, we have to ask from which country the demand is coming, because the problem is that they have to change their patterns of demand. And the Saudi Arabia have been a few weeks ago. I had also the chance to talk with Ines, the Minister of Energy of Saudi. They have ambitions for green hydrogen. They are ready to sign contract to sell not oil and gas, but to sell green hydrogen. The question is that the demand is still not there. And so the pattern of demand has to be one of the elements to be considered for making things happen. But about the ambition of Saudi Arabia, I have to say I have no doubt that they want to go faster for selling green hydrogen around the world.
So what is needed to change to encourage more demand?
First is industrial policies. So developed countries and others, they have industrial policies that they may favor to have a demand for green hydrogen instead for the fossil fuel. So this is very important. This means the legal environment is critical. In the meantime, we need the infrastructure to bring what we are producing in terms of green hydrogen into the market. So North Africa, they have 5 pipelines that can be perhaps adapted to transport not anymore gas as such, but hydrogen. We may to adapt our able to have more ship for trading ammonia. We can think about electroduct that may country exchange energy in an efficient way. So all these elements are elements of a comprehensive package that may hopefully push country to go faster. But again, I have no doubt about the ambition of Saudi Arabia. I have no doubt about the ambition of the UAE, and I've also seen other countries in the Gulf that are moving coherently to this trend.
Okay, and finally, what do you see as the future of the renewable energy sector, and what needs to happen to ensure that renewables can play a central role in addressing the challenges of climate change?
Renewables are playing and will play a central role. So, Katie, we are going to a new energy system that will be dominated by renewables, and with the complement of hydrogen, mainly green hydrogen, and the sustainable use of biomass. And as I have repeatedly said, there is no way to stop this process. The question is how to sustain this process happening and the speed and scale needed. In my point of view, again, the elements are demand and infrastructure that should be there.
Well, certainly going to be a very busy few years ahead. Thank you very much for your time. Again, congratulations on your recent re-election as the Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency. We appreciate your insights today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And if I can say in my language, grazie.